So, as of late, I have obtained Pokemon Shield, and to be honest, I like what I'm playing, but by far, this is the most polarizing Pokemon I have ever played. The wild area was quite enjoyable. Finding Pokemon you don't usually see walking around like in older generations like Snorlax or any dragon type. I ended up with a team that has one of my favorites, Goodra, and this new dragon ghost type that was given to me by some friends. To be honest though, seeing how Dragonite was pushed out of the game in favor of other dragons, I remain the right to give this game a what the fuck out of 10. Poo on you, Game Freak. Poo on you. I finally was able to make the time to make this video on Final Fantasy. I know I've said in the past that I would probably think of other subjects, but I wanted to get this out of the way because, to be honest, I just wanted to talk about this. It's about freaking time, honestly. Anyway, before people decide to yell at me in the comments, I was a very busy boy. I got myself a job in a doctor's office, and now I live the life of an 8 to 4 year, whatever. That means that most of my time in real life is making money, eating, and pooping. And with streaming being a thing to have fun nowadays, I really have to prioritize what I do from now on, since my weekends can get quite busy. Anyway, let's get to the story at hand. Today I want to explore the very rivalry that has been going on throughout the recent ages. I'm talking about a rivalry that pits two superpowers against one another for the sake of their own peace. A fight that lasted for hundreds of years and continues in small trickles throughout the recent events in 14, and it's so hidden that you may have not even noticed. Yeah, I'm talking about the fight between the glorious Paladins, the holy upon holy knights, and the vengeful blight souls of the Dark Knights. Yeah, you didn't notice that they were having a war this whole entire time? Poo on you. Now you're probably gonna look at me and ask me, what blatant confrontation are you talking about? There is no confrontation between Dark Knights or Paladins, and that is true on an outsider's perspective, but within the Final Fantasy series, Dark Knights and Paladins opposed each other, and well, I just want to talk about it. Talking about things is kind of my thing, and I want to talk about the lore between Paladins and Dark Knights, and you'll be surprised as to how much they kind of relate to a certain other fictional group or factions that you may or may not have heard of.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Paladins, the holy swords of the Sultana, are also the impenetrable shields of Ishgard, though not as many and plainly not as prevalent as the Dragoons. These are basically free paladins or exiled paladins who have come to lend their sword during the Dragonsong War, well, the tail end of it. They weren't really of much use against a Dravanian threat like the high-flying Dragoons, but their ability to guard and withstand much of the dragon threat gave them a place on the front line. But as everyone knows, they were not there in Ishgard at the beginning, but somewhere south of the continent, where a desert palace started to shine. The term Sultan Royal Court was something of inspiration within the walls of Ul'dah. Gladiators who wanted the chance to become something more would fight through the Colosseum like beasts, looking for its next meal. This has led many to lose their lives and many more to lose their faith. Those who still had the heart of justice and honor were usually hand-picked by the Order to become paladins. Yeah, as surprising as it is, most paladins of the past were born in the Colosseum and honed their skills behind the walls of Ul'dah. Nowadays, they are rare, to the point that paladins became a dying breed, since Colosseums became even more corrupt, and the reign of the Sultan, or Sultana, was coming to an end, pushed by the Syndicate, who had a stranglehold on most of the actual Ul'dah behind the scene. It wasn't until Nanamu, the most recent Sultana, stepped up and decided to make a council with said Syndicate to better control the situation. As some would say, sometimes you have to step into danger in order to defuse the situation, and what she did was, in order to avoid the chaos, she had to essentially step into chaos. Some have wondered why Nanamu would do such a thing by giving up power like this. Well, Ul'dah had started becoming a world of its own, and in reaction to that, Nanamu was already losing faith in her people. A city where money rules over the people rather than the words of the ruler became a very worrisome situation. So, in teaming up with the biggest and strongest guild, the Immortal Flames, and combining it with her own royal sect, she and Roban was able to take a seat in the Syndicate to better control and watch over the other members. Though the rest of the Syndicate had their own agenda to follow through, Nanamu actually pulled a genius move by stepping into their world and seeing up close what it is that the Syndicate actually did behind the walls. And she had her paladins be the wall between her and all of her enemies. Better yet, she was near untouchable due to the growing popularity of the paladins you yourself helped grow by being a good representation of a free paladin. One who does not have any allegiance to anyone but themselves, and still learn the techniques to better represent the paladin outside the walls of Ul'dah. Free paladins started to grow in popularity because of this, and now the name paladin had become quite the catch for warriors looking to become a symbol of honor and justice. Exiled paladins also started to show themselves and even take on the jobs being walls for the weak, just as they were taught back when they were being trained in Ul'dah. Those shining examples of the Iron Walls of justice helped the people, protected the weak, and as of recently joined the front line of the country's greatest threat against the Garleans. While they were on the field holding white magic, swordsmanship, and shield skills known all around Eorzea, none can really match them in their defensive game with the shield. They were also known to be quite defensive with their swords, not just being excellent with the shield. Shields were not just used for blocking, they were also used for attacking. They had an uncanny ability to throw their shields at the right angle so that it would come right back into their hands. No magic was used for every shield lob. It is assumed that paladins are gifted with great spatial awareness, meaning their strikes always hit their mark. And I have to say, though magical ability from the paladin may not be as powerful as the white mages, it is speculated that the paladins may have a similar connection to their power or to their force, just as the white mages do. The only drawback is that their MP pool is not as large and their mind integrity is not as solid. Both can do some sort of holy magic, but paladin's holy magic is more concentrated and in some cases less powerful, or in some little cases not as powerful, but it still has the same potent effect, making paladins kind of a tank slash support hybrid in some ways. Let's not forget why paladins have been in a decline. In the past, paladins held loyalty and honor to the Sultan royals as their biggest drive, but in the past, some paladins were driven out due to corruption, money, scandals, and betrayal. Many were bought, and many more left the order due to disagreements. Because of the Syndicate as well, the paladins were seen as unpopular Boy Scouts serving a poor royal who was losing their power, which may have been true, but still their skills could not be matched. Paladins to this day have been gaining popularity, and because of that, you can find them everywhere, but none more populous than Ul'dah's inner wall. This is the opposite to their counterpart, however, the Dark Knight. Established near Ishgard as the dark side of the Holy See, Dark Knights were the age enshrouded in shadow who dealt justice where eyes could not see. Even though Ishgard was founded on a certain establishment of peace among people and hate among dragons, the Holy See also has a social system where nobles are at the top of the hierarchy and pretty much no chance for the low class to rise unless being supported by the nobles themselves. And it is here where the Dark Knight must keep a close eye on the many wrongs that are being done within the walls of the Holy See. As a Dark Knight, one must go after all evil in any form in any way they can, even if it dips them into the very force that could pull them into insanity, as a Dark Knight plays with a certain power that many would say is complete corruption and downright evil. A Dark Knight in themselves is a knight, a judge, and an executor. They have behind the scenes destroyed corrupted noble houses, made problematic people disappear, and even put royalty to the sword. They are the agents that no one ever sees but walks in plain sight if need be. They're seen mostly as mercenaries or swords for hire, for which they will do if need be, but their alliance is for justice, and justice for them is very complicated to be sure. A Dark Knight's justice usually has them defending the weak or the clearly innocent when someone of higher power uses their force for wrongdoing. You see this in nobles all the time, and even those of religion are not excluded from their wrath. History tells us that many disappear in Ishgard when trouble rolls around in certain events, like when a fight between two nobles, or when a head hierarchy die from unknown causes, or priests being excommunicated but never being seen ever again. The Dark Knights are the sole factor in this and keep the peace in Ishgard as long as justice is needed in the Holy See. However, this also caused the order to be persecuted and even cut down when things go wrong. Many of the wrongdoings of the Dark Knight were kept secret unless someone was able to witness or become knowledgeable of their actions. Nobles, for instance, were more than likely to persecute a Dark Knight before being persecuted themselves, and in the long run, for the past few centuries, this tactic worked. Nobles, after a long while, became self-centered and corrupted. Bodies upon bodies of Dark Knights were said to fill the streets or prisons when it came to persecutions. These events did lead the strain for Dark Knights to be raised and properly hidden from prying eyes. You can think of the Dark Knights as an order comparable to maybe the Sith, the archenemy to Jedis in Star Wars, but without the whole evil aspect. Dark Knights were incredibly in tune with the aspect of darkness, something creatures like demons, ghosts, and void sins were incredibly powerful in. The darkness was something that led Dark Knights astray at times, thinking they were doing something for justice only to be told they went too far. This is why you see similarities to the Sith with the Dark Knight, if you want to put them side by side. However, Dark Knights weren't there to bring chaos like so many had thought. They were persecuted, jailed, and even killed by those they trusted, saved, and even shared lives with. They were the perfect outliers for crimes they didn't even commit because of their teachings, and their basic teaching is bringing justice to those who are guilty no matter the cost. This, however, can lead to backfires, as no matter the cause can mean anything. This in turn could mean sacrificing individuals, to leading oneself down deeper into the dark, and Dark Knights that have fully plunged themselves into the dark may find power beyond one's comprehension, but also may lead them to a path of no return. These actions have caused a splinter in Ishgard's reliance on the Dark Knight. Though they were charged with keeping the dark side of the Holy See under control, it was soon understood that the Holy See itself became what the Dark Knights have been facing for centuries: a corrupt rule where power rules over the weak and innocent, and there was nothing they could do about it as their numbers were dwindling to mere single digits. And I know what you're thinking, this sounds more like a Jedi turnover rather than a story of the Sith, and you may be right, but no matter how you look at it, Dark Knights are the darker and more violent side of justice. If you remember Star Wars, or if you know anything about Star Wars, Sith are the darker and evil side of the Force, while the Jedi are supposedly the light side and the good side of the Force. Whereas the Sith actually had their own means and justification in their philosophy. Sometimes it didn't mean evil, it means that they're trying to bring peace peace through order in their own way, the way they are taught, while Jedi are taught another way. So that's just a short term with it. I'm not some big Star Wars nut. So Dark Knights have very edgy abilities with even edgier names for said abilities. They tap into the darkness with ease, and each time they do, they sap a little bit of their very own life force, using their very vitality as a means to attack their foe, from blowing darkness out of their hands to summoning an avatar of darkness. Even their weapons are made to be as painful to use as possible, favoring great swords, double-edged weapons, and even sights, as a Dark Knight believes that the harder the use of the weapon, the better they are reminded of what they are fighting for. Great swords, for instance, are heavy and difficult to use, representing the weight of responsibility that they must bear on their shoulders, or the scythe, which reminds them that they are the reapers of death to those who are unjust. Dark Knights are the polar opposite of the Paladin in almost every way. The only similar aspect they both have are their want for justice, but the difference comes from how they enact said justice and what is deemed justice. Is it loyalty to the royals that make up the Sultan's court, or is it to yourself, as even the hierarchy are fit to be judged? As you may have noticed, Paladins and Dark Knights kind of act like opposites, but they both strive for the same goal: justice. Paladins walk among the people as shining beacons of hope. They also inadvertently cause a sort of rift between the common people and royalty, as they mostly dedicate their lives into guarding the royal line they have sworn to, while Dark Knights walk within the shadows and blend in with common folk as agents of death. They aren't seen as favorable to the nobles, but common folk can depend on them when justice is needed for those who can't defend themselves by any means necessary. So here's where we talk about their opposition. Dark Knights and Paladins have had talks, underground disputes, not really wars or fights against each other, and it's not so big. While the Paladins in Ishgard are very few, they do exist, and they protect the nobles and royalty. Dark Knights did not find this as a positive thing when it comes to loyalty, as sometimes the nobles have done the worst things imaginable. Paladins are sworn to protect their sire, while Dark Knights are sworn to cut down the unjust. So, you can see how this may be a bit of a conflict. Paladins have their own use to the nobles, while Dark Knights were seen as a nuisance. So, in order to better control the Dark Knights, they were pretty much wiped out and discredited, while Paladins were given a little bit more credit. Paladins were also part of nobility as well, as some took the profession into the front line. This made Paladins even more attractive, but still nowhere near as prevalent as the Dragoon. Dark Knights, however, stayed skulking in the shadows of Ishgard as they became something of a pariah. And to be more specific, some noble families learned some techniques of the Paladins. Those who were free, those who were exiled, taught these noble families some Paladin techniques. They weren't masterful at the class, they were just knowledgeable. Dark Knights ultimately lost the battle of conservation and became so few that by the time you entered Ishgard, there were only 2 left. Dark Knights became endangered, and the only way they could be revived was through you, the Warrior of Light, now a practitioner of darkness. It's weird, isn't it, now that I say that? Between the two, however, Paladins seem to hold just a bit more power comparable to the Dark Knight, as one of the most famous Dark Knights turned Paladin, Cecil Harvey, showed that Dark Knights was indeed a powerful job to have. He harnessed darkness expertly for sure, but because Cecil's heart was more aligned to love and care, his power ultimately switched from darkness to light. His inner Paladin completely took over. His loyalty to his friends, his family, his countrymen, and his lover ultimately made him more powerful as a Paladin rather than a Dark Knight. For a Dark Knight's power grows the more pain they emotionally and physically feel. Some would even say the anger and despair they feel from the victims become the power they need to bring about justice. Cecil is also a good example of the power between the Paladin and the Dark Knight and the conflict between the two. His Paladin side having the ability to heal minds and bring a sort of serenity, as his Dark Knight side brings forth chaos to people who he comes in conflict with, not knowing how to control his negative emotions, which led him to wearing his Dark Knight side down and becoming a Paladin once he was able to confront his own feelings. Now, Paladins and Dark Knights never really fought one another, seeing how they both had similar goals, and the Dark Knight was being killed off by the people they sworn to bring justice to. But, nonetheless, Paladins and Dark Knights were always opposing forces, dipping into two different powers, the power of light and the power of darkness, loyalty versus vengeance, the impenetrable wall versus the unmovable force. As their opposition were clear to all, many never even seen them in one room together. And that's to be expected. The way they both dish out justice differs greatly between the two, but if they were to work together, Paladins and Dark Knights may just be an unstoppable combination. However, as Dark Knights must stick to the shadow to uphold justice for the weak and innocent, so too must Paladins stay shining in the light as symbols of honor and loyalty. Which side would you pick if given the choice? Loyalty to a noble who you believe is righteous and true, or dishing out judgment on your own against those you deemed guilty? One leads by example, and the other gets shit done. Thanks for watching.